Yeah, this is my first time hosting a Hangout, so hopefully it goes well. Um, the name of this particular Hangout, or series of Hangouts, is Footsoldiers of the Patriarchy. I got this name probably about 9 months ago from a feminist YouTuber by the name of Tetsubo57, who referred to...
Ah,
Yeah, he referred to MRAs as foot soldiers of the patriarchy, and I thought to myself, I really have to do a podcast one day named that. So here we are, some
he
months
said that
later.
unironically. He actually said that unironically.
Oh, he was serious. He was very serious. So I thought we'd adopt it and make it our own. So this is episode
Wow.
0. I've named it episode 0 because I'm just learning what I'm doing, so it could be a complete disaster, but I think we'll do all right. Now, I did invite Dean Esme, but it looks like he hasn't been able to make it. Rumour is he's dressed as Shanty Binks out trick-or-treating for Halloween, so if anyone can get footage of that, by the way, we'll be willing to pay money.
He's got the sort of voice that would carry if he decided to scream at people about patriarchy. He's actually got quite the commanding voice when he chooses.
But the people
I
who
guess he
did turn
does.
up, we have a couple of guests. Marking Bad.
You're
Introduce
goddamn
yourself.
right.
Tell us a bit about yourself, just in case no one knows who you are.
Largely, I don't label myself. I'm not invested in either the feminist or MRA side of things. I consider myself an egalitarian, anti-bigot, anti-authoritarian, and recently, as a little bit of with a little bit of Bain's prodding, I've been trying to build some bridges with some of the more moderate individuals that may seem to exist on the other side. There's been no confirmation that they do exist thus far.
Which is what we'll be talking about in a minute. And Spino.
I do response videos. I'm kind of sort of growing in popularity a little bit. I'm an MRA and proud. So I just tell people that they're wrong in a really apparently interesting way.
And I've
Yeah.
invited a couple of other people. They're yet to turn up. Hopefully Felfop will turn up a bit later. I think he's out trick-or-treating with Gun at the moment.
Yeah,
But
that's understandable.
Yeah, totally. So the topic is moderates, extremists, and the middle ground.
I would like to point out that that there seems to have been some effort on the part of feminists, or at least equality feminists, to try and start putting out feelers for some common ground. I don't know if this is as a result of the MRA and egalitarian communities really starting to gain traction, or if this is as much the fact that those equality feminists in the audience are starting to realize exactly how much damage the radicalized and extremist portions of their own ideology are. Those groups are doing horrendous damage to the perception of gender equality. Not even just feminism. They're horribly representing or misrepresenting what they claim to be doing, or at least the definition of what they claim to be doing.
Well, was it a week ago? Soretta Yuki, did I get his name right?
That was it, Soretta Yuki.
Yeah, he put out a video basically asking MRAs to respond, saying that he wanted to have a unbiased, open discussion with us, and thought that maybe we do have some points. He wanted to put aside his biases, as he said. If you read the comment section of that video, though, there were a lot of extremists on either side. There were a couple on our side, unfortunately, but there was quite a few on his side as well who were more interested in strawmanning us than actually having a conversation. But at the same time, there were quite a few people on both sides willing to have a discussion, which I think is an important thing.
And something I really noticed in the comment section of that video was that there appeared to be people from both sides who were attempting to act as moderators within that that comment section, where there were people that were going out of their way to point out to individuals from their own side, like, listen, you are being really unhelpful. If you can't be positive, if you can't contribute to this, just don't bother getting in here.
Yeah, and that's what moderates on both sides need
to start doing.
Yeah.
I also especially things with writing letters to people's employers. We basically need people on both sides to crack down on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually have, I might be having a chat with Zenostrad and also Essence of Thought about something. Very likely we will sort of discuss this. I'm not sure if we're going to do those separately or together, or, but yeah, I think if we can maybe build bridges between within the community and just try and find a way for both sides to deal with this, just so we get rid of the dirty tactics, and then we can get back to telling each other we're wrong and calling each other cunts on the internet, and actually just trying to push the actual discussion forward in a more constructive way.
But we don't have to agree on everything to find a middle ground, I think. We can disagree on major things, but still find a middle ground to openly discuss topics.
I wish this headset would sit better.
I really think, though, that there is a sort of lack of definition of the term middle ground, because it depends on what we mean by that, because a lot of people just tend to think that whatever they think is the middle ground, and you see it with a lot of, but would be sort of relatively extremist in others' perceptions.
Well, what I would consider the middle ground is basically, if you want to attack a person's argument, that's fine, but don't attack the person in the sense of, attacking their livelihood or their personal life or anything like that, which isn't relevant to the argument. I think that's crossing a line.
Oh, okay. If we're just talking tactics, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and but it's also listening to the other side, I think, and actually hearing what they're saying, as opposed to just responding to straw men and stereotypes.
Yeah, well, that does seem to be a very common thing, especially with most feminists. It's just, these MRAs, they're evil and wrong, and they say all these horrible, nasty things, and then there's never a link to any MRA that ever says anything. And on the off chance that it is, it's 99% of the time not even an MRA.
Yeah, Roosh or something like that.
Yeah, it's Roosh, or maybe you'll get one of those 3 articles from Paul Elam that aren't even completely serious, except for that one.
Paul Elam 3. Yeah, but if you point out that Roosh isn't an MRA, then they'll just say, but he sounds like an MRA. But they can never actually point out any MRAs that sound like Roosh. So
it's kind of like a circular reasoning, isn't it? It's Roosh sounds like an MRA because we think he's an MRA.
Yeah,
and you also get the people that are, Return of Kings, all of these other groups. Like, I mean, the constant strawmanning of not so much Sargon, but in particular Thunderfoot as an MRA. I mean, both of them have taken no position on the subject. They just take a position as anti-feminists.
Yeah, but anyone who doesn't agree with a feminist certain brand of feminism is automatically labelled an MRA by some people.
Which, I mean, let's face it, it's intellectually dishonest and it's lazy as fuck.
Well, Laughing Witch was even labelled an MRA by Mancheeks.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
So that's how far it goes. That's how crazy it gets.
Down the rabbit hole.
Mm.
Well, I mean, even stuff like Cassie J and her Red Pill movie. I mean, she's being dismissed as suddenly having become an MRA because she's dared to take a relatively neutral position in creating this movie. She's simply attempting to report as honestly as possible on both sides.
Yeah, I'm very eager to watch that movie, see how fair it is.
Yeah, because I was chatting with Martin Daubney, because he's also been sort of chatting with me about the whole. There's going to be an article in the Sunday Times about MGTOW soon. But yeah, he was talking about the Red Pill movie and how it was probably going to just like not happen because of that, and it was actually kind of lucky that wasn't it Milo who brought out that article, and then just everything started flooding in.
Yeah, and then Man Boobs came out and said that it's a
Ah.
biased movie because all the backers apparently were MRAs. How he knows that they're MRAs is beyond me.
Yeah, it's funny. It's this just pointing to a group and just accusing them and just saying, okay, they're this group. Just how do you know that stuff? Because I could just go to any woman who attacks a man and say, oh, she's a feminist.
Yeah, exactly.
And what would they? And then the feminists would get pissed off for that.
Well, even feminists defining exactly who and what a feminist is a bit strange, isn't it? I mean, sometimes they'll say anyone who believes in equality is automatically a feminist, whereas other times, if you point out a feminist saying horrific things, they'll say, "Oh, but they're not a real feminist."
Yeah, they're just misandrists.
All right. So here's my deep philosophical contribution to that particular argument. One of the primary tenets of second wave feminism is the right to personal agency and/or personal determination. So anybody that's going out of their way to say this person is not this or this person is that is infantilizing a person and denying them their right to personal agency. They, in and of themselves, by making the no true Scott or the false equivalence arguments, are being bad feminists by the actual definition of feminism.
But that's what they constantly do. I mean, Lacey Green in her criticism of Halloween costumes. I mean, no one's forcing people to buy those costumes and wear them.
Oh, and if those costumes were not interesting to people, they would not sell. And capitalism, the way it works, dictates that any costumes that are not interesting do not survive.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like these people are actually genuine communists because they're trying to put the planned economy. I'm a liberal and I'm kind of socialist leaning, so I do understand the desire to at least have some kind of government alternative to what you kind of need. So things like food stamps and government-funded housing, healthcare, that sort of thing. I can understand. I actually think that there's a place for that in society. There's a place for that kind of government control in that area. Just so that everyone has what they need, at least. However, then when they try and get into entertainment and stuff that you don't need, just leave the free market to do that. Just leave it completely. And just inform the people.
I think there should be a social safety net for those who need it, but.
And that's an unfortunate part of where a lot of these people become extremist or fringe to their own movement, is that they start digging into other ideologies and appropriating things. So you get social Marxism and you get fairly radical communist, not and like what you are both describing is fairly socialist. It's not communist. Communist implies small group sizes living collectively, whereas socialism is everybody contributing to the greater good. And like the example that I'm going to give is that there's that article that Undoomed did a video on, where the woman is clearly, she is a radical Marxist communist feminist, like bordering on anarcho-feminist, where she wants everybody, all the women, to live in this idealized utopia she describes, but she doesn't understand that all of the other things required to put that into place would involve not just genocide, but involve complete ignorance of how the world around her works. And she's delving into other ideologies and selecting what, for whatever reason, makes sense to her, and it's not applicable when it's designed in the manner she describes. But these are people that gain traction.
So I've got a theory that extremism on one side breeds extremism on the other side.
Yes.
If you have 40 years of people basically saying men are shit, men are the cause of all the world's problems, etc., etc., you will eventually get men on the other side who blame everything on women and hate women, for example.
Yeah, you can see this with sort of like the fall of communism in say Russia. Then they became a heavily conservative sort of country.
Mm.
Very conservative and almost anarcho-capitalist in some places. Almost.
Well, anarcho-capitalists. Well, we're talking more authoritarian right than libertarian right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing, is that's a horseshoe moment where you've got some of the elements of anarcho-capitalism and some of the elements of very statist capitalism in operation, sort of supporting each other.
Hmm.
I mean, it's one of the areas in which particularly feminists tend to throw out that false equivalence and straw man that, oh, well, if you're non-feminist or anti-feminist, you must automatically be an MRA, is their constant referral to the highly, and these people aren't just misogynists, they're misanthropic MGTOWs, which, I mean, some of us have started referring to them as pigTOWs.
Because that hasn't really caught on well, though.
Some of that group is fundamentally, it's a gender flipped version of political lesbianism, with all of the radicalism and extremism implied.
Yeah, I think this backlash is just pretty much the way to actually genuinely create an actual political discussion around an issue. You do need some level of polarization, because people. I think this was something that Sargon and Kevin discussed in their first stream, but it was and it's the you don't really. You don't argue over the 10% you disagree with. If you disagree with someone on 10%, you might not end up arguing. You might not end up politically opposing them, unless you're a real heavy zealot in that 10%. So it kind of, for this anything to change, there does need to be an actual there does need to be a increase of the spectrum almost. The extremism, although on its own is unhealthy, it does help to, at the very least, open up the conversation. I mean, how many of us would have not been here if we hadn't been exposed to radical feminists at some point?
Yeah, I think that's a fairly good point.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm particularly strident about the amount of hatred and flailing that comes out of the extremist MGTOW, is because if you were to examine my own history, my own personal history, I should have been the poster child for that brand of horrific, misogynist, aggressive flailing and strawmanning and idiocy. And I wonder how it's possible to be so easily manipulated by stuff that, when you look, like, even if you look at the surface of it, whether it's radicalized political lesbianism or radicalized men going their own way, none of it makes any fucking sense. It's there's no logic to their arguments. It's, we believe in a thing, we take it on faith, and because we have faith, that thing must be true.
Well, I've always been of the opinion that there's a certain percentage of human beings which are just fucked, and that's both men and women. So to blame everything on men, or just to blame everything on women, I think is only seeing half the picture. Undoubtedly, though, there are certain behaviours which are more gendered, so there might be certain behaviours which more women do or more men do, but generally speaking, arseholes are just arseholes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as this conversation gets, as the conversation gets bigger, we're going to have to just become resigned to the fact that there's just going to be more idiots on our side. That's really the sort of sobering, unfortunate fact, is that we're going to have to eventually accept that there's going to be, if we get to the size that we're going to ever be to actually make change, there's going to be a lot of complete idiots who will make really bad arguments.
Do you think the media would send more of those idiots towards our side? If they're constantly claiming that we're XYZ, do you think people who fit into that category are more likely to move to our
eventually,
side?
I'm talking about the point when the media stops going like that. I'm talking about when we start to get to maybe a similar platform to feminism, almost, in size. At least in terms of numbers of people.
What was the name of the politician during the week? Is it Jess Phillips?
Yes. What's her name again?
I think it's a really positive step. Just the fact that a male politician brought those things up, and we're now talking about it in the public arena. And
I did notice one thing, though.
Yeah.
I noticed that it wasn't talk of legislative issues.
No, but it's a start.
Yeah,
recognition is the first thing, I think, before, you can't change things overnight, but you need to start talking about things to actually get things done. And the fact that it was brought up and it's now news and people are talking about it, I think that's a really positive thing. Plus, it's kind of exposed the misandry in feminism.
Yeah, but no true feminist.
Yeah. But I mean, how long before she starts claiming that she's getting hate mail or death threats or something? Already?
She already has, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she there must have been some it was some no-name forum that discussed her that was discussing what she did, and there was two idiots. One of them said something along the lines of I would love to see if she got raped, and another one said something it said something a little bit more elaborate, and then that's the only thing she ever addresses. It's just oh look, I'm getting mean threats now. Number one, they're not threats. Number two, that's not the only stuff you're getting. You're getting a lot of valid criticism. So just address that. Because I get stupid comments all the time. And do you know what I do?
Oh, we all do.
I ignore them. Yeah, I ignore them. No, or I'll make fun of them. It's because there was a couple. It was about probably a few weeks ago now. I was on Twitter and I said something really, really innocuous, and then the person responded "You're a fucking dinosaur account, die."
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't even know. So I just and I almost died of laughter. They almost granted their own wish. So yeah, and my response was, "Ha ha ha! That was so funny." That's all I can do, to be honest.
Well, I found if I leave a comment on, say, one of Kevin's videos or something like that, I tend to get a lot of hate from people I've never even spoken to before. They'll just come along and say, "Oh, you're just a racist, sexist MRA," and I always ask, where have I said anything which is racist or sexist? And they can never actually point to anything I've actually said or done.
Well, I had that exact same response, and I don't recall the names of the two individuals, but they appeared to be male feminists on Twitter who had responded to Dean Esme having said something about the fact that, and it all started because of feminist criticism of MRAs donating to the Red Pill movie, but not donating to male shelters or organizing them. And so I wandered into that whole fiasco, and I said, you know what? It would be really helpful if feminists weren't constantly blocking the attempts of egalitarians and MRAs and non-feminist equality advocates to create those types of centers for male victims of domestic violence and sexual violence. And, oh, well, that never happened, so I start providing links. Oh, you're just a misogynist MRA that wants to take funding from women that need it. Where in any of that is that what I've stated? What I've stated is that according to feminist statistics, if we assume that their skewed statistics are the correct statistics, and only 5% of men are domestic violence victims, well, there's not 5% of resources allocated to those victims, which means that feminism is not ensuring the equality of women to men.
Yeah,
they're ensuring the superiority of women to men in that case.
Yeah, I do like the attributing of the of male victims of the problem of male victims of domestic violence to patriarchy, as if patriarchy is responsible for the lack of help for male victims. And I just think, okay,
Patriarchy
so
backfiring.
who? Yeah, it's patriarchy backfiring. But
Which is
then,
just another
who's
word for
actually
female
in
privilege.
control? Who's actually in control of the of women's shelters? Is that the patriarchy that's banning men from those shelters, or does and feminism actually has nothing to do and has no power and whatnot, or is feminism responsible for helping women and helping women's shelters, and that's how far we've come, and that's all good feminism? But you can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it too. This is either the patriarchy is what's actually helping female victims of domestic violence, or feminism is actively fighting against it, or fighting against male victims.
But I often find that when a feminist describes patriarchy backfiring, they're actually talking about female privilege.
Yeah.
Absolutely are.
So, you know, if you talk about the draft, for example, it's
Or just the
patriarchy
notion that
backfiring.
just the notion that we have this how did Jonathan McIntosh describe it? Patriarchy is just the path of least resistance in our current social system. It's like, if that were the case, if this is some long-term program that has somehow developed, at what point would it disadvantage males in any way, shape, or form? Like, would we not have at some point, as you know, the patriarchs in this system have decided that, oh, well, that guy just got beat up by a woman. We should do something about that woman being a violent person. She's breaking our paradigm.
Well, look at male homelessness. If you bring that up, you get the patriarchy backfiring excuse. But if it's patriarchy backfiring, it's not patriarchy, is it? Because it basically isn't looking out for men. At best, it's a small number of men at the top. It's not the vast number of men at the bottom or in the middle.
Well,
So,
yeah, it's you could still maybe make an argument that it's patriarchy, but it wouldn't be male privilege.
Well, exactly.
It's a patriarchy without male privilege. It's a a gynocentric patriarchy, if you may.
But the excuse is that every male has privilege just by virtue of being male, thanks to the patriarchy. But that's obviously not the case. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a large number of male homeless, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that you will see from the other side, and you only tend to hear something similar from the extremist MGTOWs that were previously mentioned. I have, and they also tend to sort of start dabbling into very, very flawed Evo psych as well, and then it gets into really, really crazy stuff. But yeah, it's this funneling of agency to try and blame what they see as the privileged group.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean that in and of itself is a problem. Is the way that you've got this doctrinary adherence to patriarchy theory amongst especially the radicalized and extremist feminists, but then you've got this counter theory of everything is explained by evolutionary psychology amongst MGTOWs and some groups of MRAs, and neither one of them can be called, proper science in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the best that you can do with evolutionary psychology is make some informed guesses, but otherwise you're romanticizing what it would be like to have been a caveman or a proto-Homo sapiens.
Yeah, the problem with EvoPsych is, well, it's there's a couple of problems. There's it doesn't take into account outliers. So yes, there would if in a system that would favor I don't know, men being physically stronger, doesn't necessarily mean that every man is stronger than every woman. You might actually, and then you've got genetic variation, which causes just individuals to be different to the trend, the general trend. And then you've also got just the lack of acceptance of nurture actually having in any way effect at all. And that's a really that's a dangerous thing to start thinking, that you can't actually change people, that this group is inherently going to always be like this, because then if we then look at different groups in different circumstances, what we find is if nurture has no effect, then whatever this group is doing right now, you can't change it, and therefore they're inherently this. So I don't know. I'm sure black people tend to commit more crimes on average than white people in the US. And from this heavy Evo psych bullshit, you would find you would have to take the race realism stuff. And I'm pretty sure Sexy MGTOW is actually a white supremacist or white nationalist or something. So maybe some of them do. But then it really doesn't fit into reality.
Oh, look, I think everything is a very complex combination of nature and nurture, and separating the two is virtually impossible in most circumstances.
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say that there may be a slightly different, for each individual sort of aspect of a person's personality, each individual person could probably have a different proportion of what's nature and nurture. Like there are some people that you just can't change out of a certain habit, and there are going to be people that you can change out of a certain habit in different in one way. And there's another person who's going to change out of that habit in another way, and there's going to be another person who's not going to have that habit at all and never will. And then there's the whole spectrum on that side.
So should we discuss the news report about Laughing Witch?
Ooh, should we do that?
Speaking of extremists, yeah.
Yes. Well, obviously there was. It was biased. We know it was biased.
No mention of what was in the letter. I think if they had have mentioned some of the crazy shit that was in the letter, the whole report would have fallen over.
I don't know if they actually were aware of the. I don't know actually how much they knew when they were doing, because we know how journalists are these days. And we know how news is these days. They do not do their research.
And they don't care. A story's a story, basically. Clickbait.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
they don't do their research.
So now here's my question concerning this, because I don't particularly support either of the actions undertaken by either Laughing Witch or by Thunderfoot in having exposed either party to the possibility of economic ruin. But
yeah, I would agree.
Is there a valid amount of reaction to that very biased news story that is permissible in saying, like, listen, you are not reporting accurately, and while yes, that person was being economically disadvantaged, you are not reporting honestly at all?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, just like the Thunderfoot having read out her letter on his video, or her having accidentally shown her own information on her video, this does start to lead to an inevitable slippery slope of, when do we say that's enough? Stop fucking with other people's livelihoods.
Yeah, I still would say that what Thunderfoot did was restrained. He could have hit harder.
And that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily make it
the
most moral
action.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But I'm saying.
I remember.
I'm just saying that in his own, probably from his position, when he probably wasn't necessarily in the best state either. When you're hearing stuff like that. So
no, I mean,
he's probably really angry.
Examine what's going on in the last year of his life. He has not had a pleasant life.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if he necessarily has complete moral culpability of what he did. However, what he did was wrong. and it had negative consequences, unnecessary negative consequences.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, this is a really, really, it's not an analogy I like, but it is the applicable analogy. If you continue to hit a dog, eventually that dog will either bite or run. And you poke underfoot enough times, Laughing Witch, and he bit you. And he didn't bite you very hard. He just got his jaw on your hand, and that should have been enough to clue you in. And she sort of doubled down.
Well, I remember seeing a video on YouTube earlier this year where there's a couple of people sitting around someone's house, and this girl goes up to this guy and smacks him in the face. And she's laughing the whole time. He gets pissed off. He stands up. She smacks him a couple of more times. She keeps on laughing, saying, "You can't hit me back because you're a man." And, you know, she tries to hit him again, and eventually he's had enough and he smacks her in the face, at which point she starts playing victim. And I thought that was the perfect analogy for what happened with Laughing Witch and Thunderfoot.
Well, I mean, Laughing Witch put out a video where she was cackling about the fact that Karen Straughan's been struggling financially because she's been asked to participate in equality events as a speaker, and she is not always, like, unlike some people on the feminist side, a lot of MRAs aren't demanding any kind of compensation for speaking, or not significant amounts of it. And you've got the Anita Sarkeesians demanding $400,000 to speak at the State University of Utah, and then having a no-show clause that permits her to be paid after the event was threatened. And then you've got the Karen Straughans who are paying out of their own pockets and have children to raise.
Yep.
Yeah, she
and I've never seen somebody on the egalitarian or the MRA side go out of their way to play some kind of victimization card.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, like, you'll hear from a lot of them. They'll say stuff like stuff about Paul Elam, because if he makes a living from AVFM, therefore he must be evil somehow.
But that usually comes from the oh my God, capitalism is so wrong, and people didn't do communism the right way the last time. Parties.
But then these are the same people who will say that who will, like, be donating to Zoe Quinn's Patreon, even though at least when Paul Elam has his site's donations, or man boobs. Well, no, but I'm like, but people like Zoe Quinn or Anita Sarkeesian, they're not actually really producing much. They're not really producing anything. At least Paul has a site he's running, and they're actually donating to AVFM, and he's only taking a small cut from it.
But once again, that's attacking the person, not attacking the argument.
Well, but then again, there is a place for that. There is a place for these the actions of this group are bad. The actions of this group are bad. The actions of this individual are bad. There is a place for that, and there's also a place for attacking arguments. As long as you actually are making that distinction.
Well, I mean, it's in as much as you need to calmly and rationally highlight the hypocrisy of the statement, oh, well, Paul Elam makes X amount of money from running AVFM, therefore he's somehow evil, while at the same time you have people that are claiming that, who are donating to what I frankly think are victim causes, with, like, the Zoe Quinns and the Anita Sarkeesians. I don't know that Futrell really has that so much, but I mean, these are people that are claiming, oh, I'm victimized by people who threaten me, where it's hypocrisy to complain that other people are making money off of enterprises when you do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or when you support individuals who do the same thing. And I don't see any problem with highlighting that hypocrisy. Of course, highlighting that hypocrisy is inevitably spun to be, oh my God, you're such a fucking misogynist.
Well, that's everything, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything is problematic.
Yes, everything is sexist.
When you're lacy.
One thing I've been toying with the last couple of weeks is, I guess you could call it the mirror effect, and that's basically when a feminist is discussing MRAs. They will assume that an MRA is the exact opposite of everything they believe in. So if they're left wing, they assume all MRAs are right wing. If they're pro-choice, they assume all MRAs are anti-abortion. And it's amazing if you read a lot of the articles. That's exactly what you get. You get the almost mirror image of what they are.
Well, it's a bizarre form of negative image projection, is what it is.
Oh, actually, I disagree slightly. It's a mirror image of what they think they are. So sometimes what you actually end up getting is a projection of what they actually are onto MRAs.
Yeah.
So, for example, with
that's why I think it's a projection that is a negative image, like a photographical negative image. So what they are claiming they see in the world is this somewhat. It's like looking in a carnival house, like a mirror house, and getting these distorted images back of yourself, and it frightens the shit out of a lot of people because they're not sure how to deal with it.
Yeah, I can understand that. Because I have considered just doing a parody form of Steve Shives' 5 Stupid Things about the men's rights movement and both of those videos, and just switching it with feminism, and actually then sourcing the examples as well to prove it. So doing Steve Shives' parody, but actually doing better.
Well, that's another thing, in-group bias, where you see bad behaviour on the other side, but you ignore the same behaviour on your own side. That's something I see all the time, especially Kevin Logan does that all the time.
Yeah, he does. He's very bad at that.
Well, it's a form of cognitive dissonance because all of our cherished, fundamental, and they are biases, and they're a bias. We all have them. Some people are biased to a particular brand of soda. Some people are biased to specific things they find attractive about the way a person speaks. So we all have these biases, and it's a refusal to allow any of our biases to be challenged because we don't know how to identify ourselves without having those biases. I mean, that's the same thing you see in religious individuals that are very steadfast and hardline about it.
Well, I think that's a fair point. I think this happens when someone's identity is so tightly tied to their ideology, and they can't separate the two. So if you question the ideology, it's seen as a personal attack.
Which makes me question the emotional health of some of these individuals, because if you cannot self-identify and have a self-value without an ideological support system or without a group validation, then you are not really, truly a complete human being to me.
Yeah,
I hate to word it that way, but that's very much how it seems.
Emotionally stable, then. How about that? That sounds like a
yeah. You would not be completely emotionally stable if you require ideological and group validation.
But I think it's healthy to criticise your own group and your own beliefs and ideologies.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, you end up with people like man cheese.
You end up with hug boxes and echo chambers.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that at least the sort of manospherean types have done a lot better than feminism has. And
honestly,
I don't like to toot my own horn, but I have actually publicly spoken out against people from our side, if you may, sort of MGTOWs and sort of and other MRAs. I have actually spoken out against them when I thought they've done something wrong.
But that's the thing, is like I disagree with this concept that there's a manosphere and a feminist sphere on the internet. Because it's just used as just a shorthand way of creating a genetic fallacy that, oh well, you must be aligned with this group that's utterly nebulous, and therefore we can dismiss everything you say because by composition division you must be like the worst of them.
Yeah, that is a big problem. I think also I don't like I don't like the term manosphere either because it unnecessarily sort of associates MRAs and PUAs and MGTOWs and stuff, and it's just like there is a serious disconnect. Like, I don't know many MRAs who ever go to Return of Kings. Like, I'm pretty sure 99% of the MRM had not heard of Aaron Clary's Mad Max article until feminists started saying MRAs are boycotting Mad Max.
Well, it's kind of like World War II, where the Americans were allied with communist Russia, but you wouldn't say that the Americans were communists, would you? Because just because they are allied against the Nazis, because they had a common enemy, doesn't make them the same thing.
Well, even allied is even that is sort of not the best example because we're not allied with PUAs really.
No, but we do have a common enemy.
Yeah, we have a common enemy. That's true.
There's a common ideological foe for the PUAs, and but that's the irony, is that there are so many feminists who unwittingly reinforce gender roles that benefit how PUAs operate.
Well, the whole point of like this new PUA stuff is exploiting the broken system. They want the system to pretty much stay as it is because that's how they make their money. That's what all of their shit is based upon, is how to exploit the system as it is, to just get laid more. And if there wasn't a problem there, they wouldn't be there to solve it. So I think PUAs do tend to have a sort of investment in this kind of thing.
Yeah, if only they would invest in not having a conflict that actually pulls time and resources away from the actual interesting and relevant things we need to deal with.
Yeah, but then again, that most of them tend to be kind of selfish, just selfish individuals trying to just, and there's a couple who are actually interested in just helping other men in that way, but it's.
The private man, I think is his name. He does like one-on-one coaching on how men can develop better self-esteem and stuff. Like, it's actually specific to like how to be a person who doesn't necessarily need to have any external validation. I can see a value to that. I mean, that's important for anybody.
Yeah, and then you've also got the kind of traditionalist aspect to a lot of the pickup artists as well. That's really just toxic.
Yeah, I think Rishvi said in an interview that he kind of wants to settle down with a stay-at-home wife while he fills the protector provider role, which isn't really compatible with most mainstream MRAs, is it?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, like if you look at where Dean's position is right now, he's very strongly advocating that we educate men that things like common law relationships are actually potentially legally more damaging than just getting married. Because
from what I can
you don't
tell,
have any legal protections if you're just common law, or you have less of the protections that would be afforded by having a marriage certificate.
Yeah, it's very different with common law. That makes it even worse. So cohabit is, I think from what I can tell, the legally safest position is to not be cohabiting at all. And then it depends on what you're more interested in. And then from his video about talking about like hijacking with MGTOW, he made the argument that like one of the people he knew had if he was more interested in keeping his kids safe than his assets, that at least keeping a relationship with his kids than keeping his assets, then getting married would have been the better choice for him. However, maybe if you don't have kids at all, it might be better to not just get married at all, even in that situation.
Yeah, I don't think
especially
especially
in a country where you don't have something like alimony, because alimony tends to be, I don't know if it's in Canada or Australia, but I know it's in the US, but it's not in the UK. So if you're child support is pretty much the sort of the go-to sort of family court thing.
Yeah, far as I know, alimony is no longer a specific thing anymore, in Canada at least. I certainly know of individuals who have been functionally devastated financially by child support.
Yeah.
I mean, I know of a guy that basically he got to the point where he was like, he lost a job and a lucrative career, and he had previously had his child support set. He was doing maintenance work in a specific trade, and that trade is very, very busy for maintenance work in the winter. So he would make $40,000 in 4 months, and then he would make like $20,000 to $25,000 the rest of the year. So he'd only make $60,000, but his ex went to the court and said, well, he makes $40,000 in those 4 months, so clearly he makes $120,000, and they set his child support at that rate. And he just said, you know what, if I do not work literally 365 days a year, I cannot afford to make the payments for my house, the payment for my vehicle, my bills, and my child support, and I have like $100 left a month for food if I work all 365 days in a year. So he's like, fuck it, I'm just going to set myself up to become bankrupt.
And it's even worse if someone remarries and has another family, more kids.
Well, and the bizarre thing is that because of the way the adoption is required, or the adoption rules work in Canada, if I find out that I have a child and that child has been largely supported by somebody else, there's still a good chance somebody could come, the mother could come back and ask me to pay back child support, even though that child has been supported by somebody else.
So, guys, we're in the last 10 minutes. So, should we talk solutions? What's the solutions to the extremists and the moderates and the middle ground and negative tactics?
I think a healthy amount of criticism of extremists from the from the side that it's on would be a good idea. Not too much, because if we just spend too much time in infighting, it wastes actual time, and also it may give them too much of a platform. So like, it was probably best not to do another video on, say, Nolan copyrighted, or and I'm probably not going to do another video on Bernard Chapin, although I do kind of want to every now and then, but then I just think there's no point in giving him any more.
I think something important to remember about overdoing the criticism is also that with some individuals, that especially if it's somebody who's moderate, who is supporting something that may not be an entirely valid position, or it's a position that could become a better position with some work, if it seems like everybody's dogpiling, the human nature is to dig your heels in, or to become even more recalcitrant and to become more regressive about your position.
Yeah, that's very true.
But that's why people on your side or their side should have a word to them. I mean, if I saw Spino do something which I thought was a bad tactic, an underhanded tactic, I'd take him aside and have a word to him, a friendly word, and point out why I thought it was.
That's something that, like, I work in an industrial trade, and one of the things that they keep focusing on is safety intervention. When you see somebody who is doing something that is a patently unsafe act, there are good ways and bad ways to intervene. And approaching somebody as an adult, and you may not approach them even as a mentor, but you approach them like, if Spino came to work with me tomorrow and he did something because he didn't know, I would approach him as somebody who can mentor him. If I did something that he wasn't sure about, he could approach me as somebody who wants to learn how to do it correctly and safely. So there has to be some level of acknowledging that exactly what you're saying, Bane, polite intervention, ideally privately, as adults, especially as adults. I mean, just because Spino is a university student doesn't mean he's not intelligent enough to ask me questions that make me reevaluate what I'm doing.
And I think emotion plays a large part in this too. I think people get carried away with emotion and they get pissed off at hearing, the other side's arguments, and lashing out is I guess a natural reaction. It's not always a good reaction though, but maybe a quiet word to someone will calm that down.
Yeah.
Something that I've been trying to work on how best to approach the moderates on the other side that are willing to do some bridge building, and I think a huge part of it has to be the concept of baby steps, because some of these people are not coming from a position, they're just starting to realize that maybe feminism has had a bias in its statistical reporting, and giving them 101 links to things that disprove their position is only going to reinforce their cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, being able to sit down with a Soretta Yuki or somebody else of a similar, currently moderate position, saying, listen, for domestic violence, if the feminist statistics are right, then males are not getting the support they deserve according to the definition of feminism. And there are a lot of studies that prove that those statistics are not the most accurate ones we have. So we need to start looking at these statistics, and we need to have both sides start to examine them and find the good statistics, find the good studies. And I want you to work with me on this, because I don't want this to be just me screaming, oh my God, men get abused too, because that helps nobody. It doesn't actually produce a result.
I have to wonder though if there isn't maybe a better example to start with, maybe something like circumcision, because we can all, both sides can agree on that one. I think with the domestic abuse, I think a lot of people on the other side are so invested in
the economy that's developed from it.
Yeah, but also women as victims and men as victimized, that the idea that men can be victims too, or make up a portion of that.
Not just that though. I think there's a lot of them who will even deny that exists.
Yeah, because it goes against their ingrained ideology. So
I mean, like it.
Is a good
I mean, there's a lot of them that will deny that there's that there is a portion of the feminist movement that's overly hostile to male victims of domestic violence and that sort of thing. Because you do get that sort of that split. You'll have one feminist telling you, oh well, male victims of domestic violence don't exist, or or something along the lines of that, and then you'll have the other feminists telling you that, oh yeah, males are 50% of the victims, and we need to help this, but this is all caused by patriarchy.
I remember Mancheese describing it as women throwing tissue boxes at men. That was That was the extreme end of female violence against males.
Yeah,
but in response to something a male had done.
And that's a common response as well, is the notion that, oh well, if a man was abused, or if he was like, the several cases of men having their genitals mutilated by their adult wives, well, there must have been a pattern of abuse that justified this. It was a justified retaliation.
What did he do to deserve it?
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard that about my own past. So, I honestly think that your
an actual
point
victim
about
blaming.
starting with the discussion of circumcision, it might open a lot more doors, because I have yet to meet a person who, whether or not they are interested in having children, does not have some concern for the welfare of children.
Well, there are
sort of an appeal to emotion, but
I've met a lot of people who are pro-circumcision.
There's some on our side and some on the other side as well, but I do think
I know Milo. He's pro-circumcision. To be honest, Milo is a bit of a necessary evil to some extent.
Yeah, well, obviously I disagree with him on that particular thing in a major way, but
I'm not circumcised, and if I have children, I will not have them circumcised, because it's an infant. There is no excuse for non-medically necessary procedures on their body.
Yeah.
I mean,
if babies, best not to do it.
If I have an infant male child, and the doctor says, listen, the foreskin is fused over the glands of their penis, we need to do something to ensure that they are capable of going to the washroom correctly. I will ask them to figure out what is best for the child in a medical sense. But there's no other reason to, like, if I've got gangrene in my hand, okay, remove my hand. But don't just remove my hand because I might get gangrene.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the best examples I've heard in ages.
I mean, I regularly scratch myself on nails and bits of steel wire. I'm not worried that I'm going to get tetanus. You don't have to fucking, do invasive procedures to protect me from lockjaw. Just give me the anti-tetanus shot and let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. What trucks in your area, Spino?
Yeah, this is it's just hard outside and it's really, really warm here.
Do you want to give us
make
an
a terrible
update?
joke about whales and sheep, but it's not like Maine doesn't live 2 hours from New Zealand, which actually used to have more sheep than people.
Yeah, something like that. So give us the update on your living situation if you want.
Well, I'm out now. I'm in my new flat. I've yet to actually genuinely speak to any of my flatmates. I said hello to one of them. So I don't know if I've just come into a house full of insane radfems, but I would be surprised. But although there is a there is a part of me that has a bad feeling that I've got a situation about out of the frying pan. How hot the frying pan was, I'm pretty sure that the fire can't be that much worse. So, and it's very unlikely that it is the fire from now on.
Oh, hopefully for next year you can you might be in a position to have shared off-campus accommodations.
No, I have even if I do end up I'll probably end up being here next year as well, sort of in this accommodation. And no, if the next group tries to do anything, if they do what they did last time, I'm probably not going to be as it's probably not going to hit me as hard as it did the first time because I was surprised. And also I can just kind of threaten them. Maybe I'll just be like, "Don't fuck with me," because I'm actually
just buy a Smash the Patriarchy T-shirt, just in case. Test the waters.
Yeah. No, I've considered just getting a pen camera or something and just wearing it, and just wearing it and keeping it on me at all times. So if I do need to just record, I can say, "Look, you do realise that whatever you do, people will find out about it." And trust me, I have a platform. I can speak. I can get close to journalists. I can get close to the whole fucking men's rights movement if I need to.
Yeah, and to be fair, if there were some reason why you couldn't directly access them, it's not like there isn't a support network to make sure that the message got out to the relevant bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that might actually be my final point about this is we need to be supportive of the people who are attempting to build the bridges between moderate groups on both sides.
Most definitely.
I mean, when you have people like Soretta Yuki, I wonder if the reason that Soretta Yuki didn't just up and delete their channel was because there was a private backlash.
It's fairly.
I think he did actually, though. I think he did delete his video.
No, he deleted his whole channel and his Twitter.
Yeah, the whole channel and the Twitter account is gone.
Oh.
Yeah, no one really knows why. So.
Did he not like what happened to? What happened on Honey Badger Radio? I think they were slightly unnecessarily mean, to be honest, a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is it's been a theme going back to Aaron Pizzey and Murray Strauss and Warren Farrell, where people have attempted to bring a more balanced outlook to the conversation, and they're run out of town.
Yeah. So we don't know who actually was nastier, whether it was the feminists or the MRAs. Probably from track records, I'm going to make some guesses, but I'm not going to. But no one take my word for it, and I'm not actually making any genuine accusations.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly seems like, based on the conversation that occurred in the comments section, that there was a greater number of self-labeled feminists who were very critical of the video, and very critical of those commenting.
Yeah, I kind of got that opinion as well.
And there was only one person in particular that I saw that I don't even know if they're an MRA, and I can't remember their name. It was a reference to a bait shop or some kind of shop, and they just appeared to be randomly trolling the piss out of people, and I took them to task. I'm like, we have a chance to begin dialogue.
Winters thread?
It was somebody that was they made several comments in several places.
Yeah, I think
one
I
of
know
them
what
was
you're talking about.
Yeah, and I went after them and I said, you know what, there is a chance to start a dialogue here. Either be supportive or take whatever it is you are doing elsewhere, because you are not contributing positively to what we're trying to start here.
Yeah. Because then when I put a comment in there and I sort of said, okay, so, okay, if you're interested, maybe we could do a hangout or something. And then one of the people commenting was Varmint Coyote, who has done an inordinate amount of just Spino's a sophist in comment sections of videos of me.
But here's the problem with that.
Hello, guys. How we doing?
Was the candy collecting good?
Yeah, the little guy had a good time until he was done doing it and wanted to go home and play games.
No, my stubby little legs are done, Dad. Let's go.
Yeah, it actually was his first time going trick-or-treating, so yeah, we did it and it was great. Good times.
Woohoo!
And there's good times ahead.
Yeah, oh yeah. So what did I miss?
The whole show, basically.
That's what I figured. Sorry.
That's all right. There'll be another opportunity. Don't worry.
Yeah, I saw the time and was afraid that it wouldn't work out too good, but I tried.
Well, we've been talking about extremists, moderates, and the in-between, so I guess you can, have a couple of minutes to tell us your opinion.
Well, yeah, my opinion kind of goes back and forth on this one, to be honest. It kind of, we need the moderates, the guys that are just making based arguments, obviously, for the public to look at when they do look, but you kind of need that crazy bitch to throw herself under the horse in front of the king just so people look to begin with. So I kind of get mixed feelings about it, almost like you need both.
Almost like Paul Elam's, those 3 articles are almost a necessary evil.
Yeah. As unfortunate as it is, I mean, it's you got to get them to look.
Yeah, I don't necessarily completely agree with some of the stuff that Paul's been saying recently. He's said some stuff like he did that one about the violence, wasn't it? Wasn't it like, if a feminist throws like a drink on me, it's possibly attempted murder or something.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
because it could set you on fire thing. Yeah. I ripped that apart basically.
Yeah, and then he also said, I think he also did I think it was like a twit longer or something. I can't remember exactly, but he said something along the lines of he's coming with this attitude of we've got to start using their tactics because they're the only ones that are effective. He also said that with his response to Skeptor as well.
Yeah, I think that's the last resort though.
Yeah, it should be something a last resort, and B, you should be very, 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 very restrained, and I don't like the attitude, because as far as I'm concerned, what we're doing now, the sort of ethical responses we're doing now, they seem to be working. They're slow, and yes, we're going to watch people get hurt in the process as we until we start winning. But there is a sort of an aspect of we don't want to start causing more damage in the process of just unnecessary damage, really. And that any negative bad actions we do will start to bite us.
Yeah, and also
Well,
if you have 1,000 moderate MRAs and one extremist, you know that the other side's going to paint the 1,000 as extremist based on the actions of that one extremist.
Fuck, if you've got 1,000 gamer gators and one fucking pickup artist, they're going to call them all MRAs and label everything the pickup artist does. It almost doesn't matter in that regard, in my opinion. It's like that. There's a point there where it's like the public image is just so fucked up that it kind of almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, and Spino or Felfop will remember the name for me, but the Tom Brick, lit himself on fire in front of a courthouse. And that has been twisted as MRAs firebombing a courthouse.
Yeah.
Amazing,
isn't it? Amazing.
And I mean, I didn't hear about Earl Silverman's suicide until a year after the fact. I live less than 4 hours from where he was living, where he was running his shelter. I didn't hear about that in my own province. It was reported by 2 national news sources on like page 38. Well back in the newspapers. This is not stuff that was reported in mainstream media. I agree that you almost do need somebody under the king's horse to get some traction so that people will notice issues. But the fact of the matter is that there seems to be like an institutionalized bias against reporting on anything that does not coincide or support the current feminist equality narrative.
Oh yeah,
we need to figure out ways to get and I hate to call it insert ourselves into the narrative, but to bring the narrative out into the public view and make it a broader narrative, and make it about people are being abused, or people are suffering disadvantage, as opposed to this is all a gendered thing. Unfortunately, that's very difficult to do with feminism trying to gender absolutely everything, so far as I can tell.
But a lot of people are even unaware of men's issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never heard of them.
That famous Richard Dawkins clip.
Yeah.
God. Yeah, actually, that clip though, the question he was asked was not the one on the bit of paper, because it was actually it was Sage's question, and he had like a statement before it, like saying that I've been pretty much like harassed by the gender studies department and had like loads of false accusations towards me, and then the question, does feminism contribute to a good what was it, like a freedom speech or something like that, and then they only asked does feminism contribute like that. I thought I don't know if that was necessarily Dawkins doing that, or if it was the people in charge or the people at the university or something, but it was still shady.
So
part of me thinks Dawkins has yet to realise that like feminists are the people he's often pretty much criticising 99% of the time when it comes to these sort of progressive leftists and stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's politics too. Certain groups are, you can't criticise without being labelled, misogynist or a racist or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
As we saw from the footage in English Parliament during the week.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, there was also a Liberal Democrat MP that was labelled anti-feminist for saying that we should pay some attention to male victims of domestic violence.
That's not anti-feminist by feminism's own definition.
Yeah, no. Well, they're the ones. No, here's what I'm going to say: is you're saying it, not me. You feminists are the ones saying it, not me.
Heretic.
Well, I mean, I've made that point. Like, either your definition is the equality of men to women, in which case you are failing to serve the male half of that equation, or if feminism is just about women's issues, then you need to step aside and permit the existence of other groups who will focus on men's issues. It's one or the other. I don't care which, but don't expect me to be feminist when you're not supportive of fathers having the right to see their children reasonably, when you're not supportive of male victims of sexual violence and domestic violence having services. I mean, there's a skyrocketing suicide rate amongst males, and the bulk of those victims are college-aged males. Like, what are we doing wrong in society that we have this 4 or 5 to 1 ratio of male suicide victims to female suicide victims in an age group where they should be coming out into the world and becoming adults?
Patriarchy backfiring.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I think it boils down to we need to stop kicking sand and screaming like children in a playground. We need to be adults about this. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people reaching back the other way, willing to undertake conversations on an adult level.
Yeah, I think the constant assumption for even those who would otherwise be willing, and this is something I noticed with Zenistrad and a lot of others, is they assume bad faith on the part of the opposition. They say, okay, this person's going to argue in bad faith. There's no point in having a discussion with them. And so, I mean, if they were right, you could kind of understand why. However, even in that situation, I'd still say I'd go and argue with Steve Shives, even if I thought he was going to argue in bad faith the whole time.
Yeah, but I mean, just because a Chanty Binks comes along and wants to argue in bad faith with me doesn't mean that I don't have a vested reason to inform the audience that will inevitably gather.
Exactly.
And the fence sitters and the undecided will benefit from seeing who is being reasonable. And to be honest, the comments that and they come from both sides, where so and so is invested in that ideology and they're intractable and you can't sway them. It's just a whole series of fallacies that you're placing on that person to excuse yourself from the necessity of being an activist. You can't just say, they're a feminist and they're intractable. Why don't you?
Well,
why
it's
aren't
not
you
that.
trying to find some common ground?
I don't necessarily think that's what they mean, though. And I'm going to be a bit more charitable for this because, and this is coming from someone who would go and talk with pretty much anyone on the other side. But I think what they mean is this person would argue in bad faith and would try and pretty much just go with gotcha questions the whole time throughout the debate, and people would, and then it would look like they'd won it when they hadn't.
Well, they squirm a lot. I mean, you hit them up with the shared parenting thing with now, and feminists consistently are like, I think the shared parenting thing is bullshit patriarchy. Then you point out Tender Years Doctrine now always switches to now is opposing forced shared parenting. Then you point out to them that that's not what now was opposing, that's just what now said they were opposing. And they either shut the fuck up, or they scarper, or they turn their conversation into something else. Invariably, I've ran into no one who hasn't done this yet. Not one person besides Ross Dunn, who was barely a feminist.
And one of the things that I will typically throw in there is that there is a growing body of evidence that demonstrates that co-parenting and shared parenting between parents that are not poisoning the well against the other parent, while they are not as successful children, like those children don't grow to be quite as successful as children of intact families, those children are vastly better equipped as adults than children in fractured homes where there is a poisoning of the well occurring.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, that's Warren Farrell's spoken about that. There's been other academics that have spoken about it where they've said, like, listen, if you have two parents, even if they hate each other, but do the best they can for the children and are responsible adults about raising their children and sharing the time, those children do not get into drugs. They don't get into gangs. They do reasonably well in school. They have fewer emotional and psychological issues as adults. I mean, it's in the best interest of the child to have co-parenting.
Obviously. I mean, that's no-brainer stuff there, but it's stuff that gets battled the whole way through.
Yeah, but they will deny that the child, they deny that co-parenting is in the best interest of the child nonetheless. It's like, then you are not supporting the best interest of the child if there's all of this data that says that those children who are co-parented do better.
Well, that's when, what Laughing Witch did anyway at that point was, her answer to me at that point was, well, feminism's job isn't to take care of kids, it's to take care of women. So there you go. And she's just one feminist who's obviously a little corrupt, but whatever.
Oh, come on, you miss her.
Oh, I miss her. But this drama has been so juicy. I've been going through popcorn and straws, sucking it all up. It's been just good times.
Yeah, no, I've kind of made a vow not to make videos on drama though, because I don't want to get sucked into it.
Yeah, it can be a bit distracting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I will talk about I'll talk about it on streams, and I'll talk about it in comment sections, but I will not do videos unless I'm directly involved in it already. Then maybe I will do a video, but outside of that.
And I think it encourages more drama too, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're just about done, guys. Any other last comments?
Not any from me.
I have one comment, and it's relevant because Felfop came in late because of trying to get his kid out and enjoy Halloween. For those of you that are giving out Halloween candy, if you have candy left over, please consider giving it to Christmas charities for disadvantaged kids, like the stocking stuffer charities.
Ooh,
because
that's a good
there are going to be children out there who are not going to have much of a Christmas. So that's been my policy the last few years.
That's a good idea.
We have Christmas coming. You know what? If there was an MRA drive to really support Coats for Kids and Santa's Anonymous and stocking stuffer charities, I think that would do a lot to prove how much we are invested as egalitarians and MRAs in seeing that our new generations are going to be supported and raised in as egalitarian a society as we could hope.
Good point.
Can't argue with that. Can't argue with that at all.
And to be honest, there's going to be kids that didn't go out for Halloween. So you know what? Making a kid really happy about Christmas because there's one more Santa out there, not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
So you guys want to give a plug to your channels?
Yeah, sure. I'm spinosauruskin, and I tell people they're wrong by telling them how their arguments are flawed, and I do it sometimes very angrily.
And you're very enthusiastic about it too.
Yes. In my videos, I'm actually genuinely enthusiastic. It's 2 a.m. though, so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I like Felfop's videos, to be honest. I'd almost plug him over me, but Marking Bad on YouTube. Honestly, most of my videos, I've started to get into a lot more philosophical stuff because I think that's important in demonstrating that there is common ground. I still pick apart feminists and vegans and CrossFitters and MGTOWs because there's bigots in every group, and they all need to be shown the light of day. Especially the vegans.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Felfop. I do stuff. I pick on people, make response videos, make terrible parody songs, and other stuff
terrible.
too.
They're amazing.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, the singing leaves a lot to be desired. I need a different voice over artist.
So you gonna sing a song for us before we go?
Only if you'll play the piano, Mr. Piano Man.
Oh, and as an additional plug, I think everybody should follow @RebelBase on Twitter. There is some absolutely fantastic material that individual picks apart.
Oh, just plugging your girlfriend.
A bit personal. And of course the B list.
Oh yes.
Yes.
The B list.
Yes,
probably plug
you need
Red
to...
Robot while we're at it.
Yeah, sounds cool.
Right, so I guess that's it. Thanks, guys, for turning up and having a conversation. And I'll get you guys back sometime in the future. I kind of want a revolving cast at this point. So, yeah, thanks a lot. And I guess that's it. Bye.
Bye.
Thank